Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diane Sydney Bakrera, commonly known as Didi Bucks. Welcome to the Amen Break podcast. With me, I have my lovely guests who will introduce themselves. On my right,
Look at me, Kwemolaring. I'm a lovely guest. Oh, thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here today. My name is Aisha, and I'm looking forward to a fruitful deliberation. Ha! The English, she said.
Pressure ya Kazungu. I am Tasha Muira, and looking forward to these conversations.
And I am Ruby Loretta. Very excited. Mashallah. Mashallah.
Hi, Morgan Zerothia. Good to be here.
Hi, Bana Mwesige. I'm glad to be here. The gay is important.
so our conversation today is around gender-based violence, but also structuring it with faith. I'll start with Ruby, who's I don't know your Apostle Ruby.
For my apostle.
Please share with us what you think of what the Christian faith talks about GBV, but also their contribution in amplifying GBV voices, the positive and the negative.
So, I think, let me start with old texts. I think there were a lot of scriptures that enabled GBV through the old texts. And then fast forward the New Testament, here comes Jesus, and they're preaching about love. They are sitting down with sex workers or prostitutes, and things change. But when we look at the current global stand when it comes to faith, whether Christianity or Islam, I'm going to focus on those two because those are like the biggest faith institutions globally. I think we have a lot of religious extremists who are following, when it comes to the Christian side, they mostly follow the old texts because a lot of the new texts, scriptures or quotes are left out. And then we have faith leaders who interpret texts to their own understanding and share that with the audience or the mass or their churches. And then things are still lost in translation by the individuals. And we've seen a lot of the ripple effect of this, of people going through the old texts, walking word by word, living word by word by the old texts. You're going to hear people saying, let us stone this one for stealing. Let us cut off hands, from this one for stealing. And then I'm not going to talk about the Muslim because we have a Hajat in the room who will talk about maybe the Sharia law. Sorry, the Sharia law. I'm not very conversant with that. But with the Christian, I think we have a lot of Christian extremists who now have politicized faith. It is no longer even according to the Bible, but they've politicized it. We have pastors, priests who are moving within the political spaces, and now scriptures have become political. It is not about Christianity, it is not about faith, it is now political. In conclusion.
We'll have the Muslim context.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anyways, the scholarly or the people that keep preaching the religion to us, we've been listening to whatever they've told us, but then if you go deep, if you dive deep into the Islamic religion and the prophet that they keep quoting, he was a very loving man. He had 7 wives, but he was a very loving man to all the wives. And not at any moment did he get violent. He didn't do domestic violence. And they keep telling us in the mosque, you have to obey your husband. The husbands are told, you have, if your wife doesn't do this, then she's disrespecting you. They've been teaching us you have to do all these shows, you have to please your man, you have to do everything. But then, if you go deep, if you dive deep and start reading, and lucky enough, these days Muslims have gone to school, not like those days of women can't go to school, you can't be seen around men and everything. Right now, the women are coming up to also tell us, you know what? If you are a wife, your husband doesn't marry you to do the chores in the house. If they can't afford to get a person to do all that, then they are not right. If they can't afford it, then you're doing it, do it because you want to do it. Don't do it because the religion preaches that you have to. And so they've even started like to teach people how to treat their women well, because this is a human being. I'm supposed to be a flower. I'm supposed to be a decoration at your home. So there is no way these two can, like gender-based violence and faith, I think they interconnect.
Well, for me, I believe that Christianity in nature, it doesn't support GBV. But unfortunately, sometimes the teachings are misinterpreted. Sometimes the scriptures or even culture comes in play when it comes to our religion. And many times, what what the religion teaches us and what's actually happening on ground, there's a lot of challenges in between, and then religion starts to be the cleaner of those challenges, and they promote GBV because they are silent about it. However, we also have seen religion playing a big part in trying so much to hold spaces for persons who have gone through GBV. We have things now like safe spaces in churches. We have things like women is Mothers Union. We have spaces like Sunday school for the kids who have been abused and all that. So yes, despite the fact that we try as much as possible to avoid GBV in religion, sometimes it is inevitable, especially when it comes in touch with culture, when it comes in touch with values, and the worst part of it, the religious leaders are the ones who are most perpetrators because they are silent about it. They know it for sure that our pastor is a very abusive husband, but they will, when they are in the community, they will show that all is well, he's the best person ever. And you keep hearing things of the pastor raped a child, so and so was, when they went for prayers, instead of the prayers, the pastor touched.
Like they keep covering the truth.
Yes.
What will people say about the church? What will people say about the man of God because they've done that? And that is enabling. And it's not only in one religion, all religions. Because us in Islam, they keep quoting, your prophet had married a girl of 12 years. But then when you go through the teachings, he didn't touch that girl until she was of age. But yes, she was there as his wife because the father was like, you're a man of God, and I believe my daughter will be in safe hands with you. So all through her young age, they used to play like he's playing with his wife, but treating her as a child. So like we all just found the scripts. I can't defend them because I was not there. I only go by what was taught to me.
So I just wanted to add on to what the previous two speakers were saying. about the systems that uphold SGBV in our religious institutions. Religion is a team sport, so you support your team, right? If you're Catholic, you support the Pope. If you're Muslim, you support the people in your team. So if, for example, the person on your team has done something wrong or is abusive, the inclination is, I'll still support this person because they are on my side. They believe the same things that I believe, which is a thing that perpetrates and keeps on abuse going on longer than it should have. Because if, as someone who has slept with many pastors and their wives, as someone who has slept with many pastors and their wives, the person who is held in the most high regard is the leader themselves, rather than you, the victim. So, because once the leader falls, the whole structure starts to crumble. But also it affects your faith as the faith of the believers. So people are afraid to lose faith because their leader has crumbled. People are afraid to lose their faith because the priest is touching kids. So they would rather accuse the kids, accuse the people who are being victimized, than accuse the leader. But also the scripture itself, scriptures like marriage is something around marriage being non-negotiable, that divorce being non-negotiable in marriage are, first of all, very redundant, but also they perpetrate systems and cultures of abuse. Because from spiritual abuse, that is a form of spiritual abuse that translates into physical, domestic abuse, verbal abuse, because once they can abuse you spiritually using a scripture, then they can control you to abuse you even physically, even financially, because then that first barrier has been broken down. The salvation of your soul has been broken down. Then they can break on the other things further. So those are some of the factors I'm thinking about when I see religious spaces or faith spaces upholding abuse.
Bana's words, I'm still thinking about the many wives and pastors.
Pastors and their wives. Both of them.
But I'd say, as a spiritualist, I believe that all structured religion is built on systems of oppression. We'll take the live example of what's happening with the new head of the Anglican Church, the Mali, that lady, the head of Canterbury. We've seen that the rejection to her position in the church, in that church, is centered on the fact that it is a woman. We've seen the African church and all those that fail to understand that actually the Protestant church comes out of specific oppression to the Catholic church, to how they were being treated, to say the head of the king does not want to, they are not allowing him to get divorced. It's a system of oppression, so let's create another church. And here they are 400 years later still saying a woman cannot lead us because of her stand on, what's the biggest thing they've been pointing out is her stand on, her support for same-sex relationships. Systems of structured religion are structured on, there has to be a weaker person within that we can oppress, to then see God is so good because some of us are elevated and some of you have to. So as a spiritualist, I believe that all systems of religion must be broken down for us to see true liberation for people, to see true faith. Because if our faith is tested against how submissive are you going to be to a system for you to access God, for you to access, you'll go to heaven if you break yourself down and be submissive and be poor and subject yourself to all this suffering. That is the only way you're earning the right to heaven. And that in itself, for me, I think unless we cannot start discussing gender-based violence within structured religion without looking at why does it thrive? Like, why are those systems there? Why do we, in a space of faith where God calls us and says we're all created in his own image, so we are all beautiful creatures and we're all equal, why must there then be a class below others? Or why must there be a system that says men must come to God first and we must go through them because they're the head of the church and they da, 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 da. Those structures are not created for us to see fairness and safety. So they are built specifically for a certain gender is much more closer to God. That is why they refer to God as a he. Even when for us we look back as African spiritualists and see that God is actually female. The creator, what gives life, is female. But structured religion must tell us that some of you are less and must come through these people to go to God. So as we discuss GBV in that system, we must be open to discuss those tiny pillars that keep those structures in place.
And this is a conversation that Women of Faith is holding. It's to figure out how we dismantle the patriarchy in these institutions, but also how do we support, quote unquote, the religious leaders who know God more than the rest of us, but also how do we support people who are victims of this violence. So again, it's a conversation for us. What do we do? What do we? Who do we get in touch with? To sort of unpack that for us. As Muganzi mentioned, the traditional spiritualists, and we also see that Uganda has adopted a lot of Christianity, which has been a colonial thing, and we have sort of flashed the traditional beliefs. So how do we get back to that? As Women of Faith, we're trying to figure that out. Maybe you can just share what you think. I'll start from whoever is ready.
I think we start by deconstructing faith and deconstructing the things that uphold oppression in faith. I think you can still be a person of faith and still stand up for women and still challenge people who are abusive, but also combine our fight because when you just take out the physical abuse or the gender-based violence or the domestic violence, you are just fighting just a tip of an iceberg. But underneath that is the spiritual misogyny, the spiritual abuse of someone who confidently tell you a woman cannot preach. Yeah? Therefore, a woman is less than. So what qualifies a man to preach of a woman? The penis? Or what thing, yeah? We need to deconstruct those ideas before we can even deconstruct the whole idea of abuse. But even on abuse, while we are okay with a pastor selling holy rice and beating up people in church and burning Bibles and all this. Sorry, Siri. Sorry. So while we are okay with these other forms of spiritual abuse, we cannot dismantle the abuse of women in our spaces before tackling the abuse, the spiritual abuse, the financial manipulation, the media, the targeted harassment of people. All these things work in tandem together because the spiritual abuse is what leads to the physical and emotional abuse. If you look at, for example, there's a famous pastor in Kampala who went ahead and said that the wife was doing things and what, and he got another wife. That's a form of spiritual abuse and emotional abuse because that is the start. So those are the precursors to then he's justified for beating her because she's not performing her marital duties or because she's less than or because of all these things. So we need to start by dismantling the things, the beliefs and the systems so of all these forms of abuse. And I strongly insist that we need to dismantle spiritual abuse first. Yeah, things that we look at and are small and we laugh at. Your pastor is it is mandated that if you're to go to that church, you should pay tithe every month. Why is it mandated that way? Yeah. And if I cannot be able to pay tithe every month, why am I being financially abused? Also, what if that tithe is supposed to pay my rent because I have all these other responsibilities? So we dismantle that. And then from that one, because financial abuse is a form of control. Once they take an inch, they'll take a ruler after that.
I think for me, I will come in with the theologist part. I think for us to walk hand in hand with whatever faith we believe in is to also study the scriptures, study the history. I'm very happy and glad that we have a growing number of feminists, womenists, scholars who are, deconstructing scriptures, because everything moves with that book, that one book. And I'll give an example. Like if you go and look at the history of the King James Bible that almost every religion is using under the Christianity umbrella, and you learn about that history of that one man who wrote this book, you get disgusted because this person hated women. This was an era where women were not given any power. So, and then we have the Apocrypha, the books that were taken out of the Bible. And we have women who wrote scriptures. Majority of the women who wrote scriptures were scholars. Mary, Hannah, their scriptures were taken out of the Bible. And we also have other scriptures that talk of our traditional faith that were also taken out of the Bible. So when you start studying, checking the history, and diving deep, you get to understand that a bunch of selfish men sat in a room and said, how do we benefit from this one book? How do we control people with this one book? This is going to contradict what we are saying. Take it out. This, take it out. This, take it out. And this is how we are going to move. So when you get to that history part, you get to see that a bunch of men sat and needed power. And mind you, this Bible was written in a period where women were meant to be submissive. And it's there. It's very plain in the Bible, in Ephesians, women must submit to their husbands. So you tell me how, even in this day and era, it's going to be difficult. I think what the scholars are onto right now, bringing out this and restudying the scriptures and seeing how also words were lost in translation, seeing that the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, the New Testament was written in Greek. These are not languages. You see, when we translate from Luganda, one word can mean 10 words in English. And someone says, no, we shall now move with this word. Let's not look at the other words. So when I say a bunch of men sat in a room, it started also from the language, the translation of these scriptures to English and changing the narrative to fit into what they were comfortable with. Adding on to that, I've been privileged to be in those spaces with a few scholars who are doing this, and it has been an eye-opener. One of the things that I have learned, and we read even in Sunday school, but for some reason, I think we are groomed to just think one thing, is that God is gender diverse. But then every time we are praying, we're saying he. God is diverse. Like, it's GNC. The Almighty is not there is a she, there is a he, there is a they are plural. But for some reason, everything is he. Even when you're praying, even when the pastor stands, wali kukatuti abagamba he. We've made God masculine. And we've given the Almighty masculine names. So here we are with scholars learning that there is a divine who is feminine, with feminine energy, who is the blesser, the giver, the one who gives birth to everything that we see, and the one who carries wisdom. So, I think that's how we can start. And to add on to something that Bana said with the pastors, there is a way we've normalized pastors shaming while on the pulpit. Like Pastor Naimidida stands there on the pulpit and starts shaming people in the church and calling out people in the church. And I don't know where ethics have gone to, because we need to separate ethics from faith. And I think also that's like my second point and my last point. We need to separate ethics from faith. And that is constantly lost, where now ethics have become faith. Pastor will say the most disgusting thing with minors in the room, or behave in such a way with, like, using language, like abusive language, while tearing down a woman, and fellow women in the audience are clapping their hands. And it is not okay. And talk about a woman's menstrual hygiene, and shun this woman and talk of her, she's dirty, she was smelly, and people are clapping, and it is not okay. So that's why I'm saying it has been now politicized. It is no longer faith. And in some spaces, it has become a cult. Like, it has transcended to being cults rather than religion. Yeah.
For me, I would look at going back to Muganza's point of, the structure. And I mean, I'm affiliated to a brother who's a pastor, and he also has his sentiments around how religion, faith is being viewed now when you talk about politicization, prosperity. Like, it's not the authentic gospel that we should be hearing. But also, my question that I constantly ask my brother and other pastors or friends who, again, know God more than I do, is who transcribed, because the Bible was never written in English.
No.
The communication was never in English. So my constant question is, who transcribed?
A bunch of men.
And
Because they're the ones with power.
edit and remove, but also given the day-to-day, seeing how pastors, preach, but also giving limitation, you see women are the ones doing the basic.
Ushering.
They're doing the ushering, the
Cleaning
cleaning of
the
the church,
church.
collecting the tithe,
Yeah.
but they're not at the pulpit to sort of, give that leadership.
And they tell us, according to scriptures, if you do it, you're going to gain heavenly favors. God will bless you. Yes. Era bw'osooka mu muzikiti n'osanga nga wakyaafu, you have to clean. God will favor you more. But I just found my way back to religion. I had given up on religion because there I was. Like, they keep preaching whatever you do is wrong, like your sexuality, the way you present yourself. God doesn't want that. So as a human being, I feel like I've already sinned enough. I've oversinned. I see no reason why I should even belong to a religion that doesn't accept me. So I gave up on everything religion. It took me time to finally find myself back in this space. Also, for peace of mind, because all they teach us leads us to your peace of mind. And when you spoke about God being gender diverse, the first verse I read in the Bible, and God said, let us. So I do believe that. Growing up, we had a share at the mosque, and he had a daughter who was in primary. I think she was in P7. And things of growing up, then you have a boyfriend on the side, boys have started tapping on you. The girl left school, and then the next thing she knew was the dad told her, you're getting married, whether you like it or not. Like, who gives all this authority? Have you even thought about what your daughter is going to go through in that marriage at that age? So I was with the younger sisters in the same class, and they also worried about the same fate. So how do I believe in a system that is designed to make me believe whatever my father, whatever the man who preaches says? And disclaimer, I am a believer. I am not saying all this because I don't believe in my religion or anything. I do believe. But then there are some aspects that I refuse to accept. And if that doesn't make me Muslim enough, then it's okay. Mashallah. At least I know there is a God that I serve, and beyond men that teach me what to do here, I report to one person. So regardless of what you're saying, I am doing what I'm supposed to do, or I'm doing what I believe gives me peace and comfort in my religion. And if that leads to gender-based violence, then I was going to use a very big word, but yes, religion.
Your goddesses are happy that you found yourself coming back to believing in your faith your way. Because again, as you guys said, structures you follow, you have to bow, you have to kneel, you have to do this. But then, as a person who doesn't like to do business as usual, I believe anyone is able to, have that divine connection on their own, not structured. And that's what we're trying to do, sort of put our voices out there. But
I think I'll still emphasize that as long as we continue to discuss God in the context of what religion has structured for us, we say historically, when you look at the God of the Bible, has always been a violent creature. God destroyed the whole world, told Abraham, go and kill your son. In the Egyptian era, went and killed the firstborn, and then The God of the Bible has constantly been a violent person, which is why even here in the current times, when our pastors are preaching, they preach from a place of fear, that unless you're so taken up by this thing that must be feared without question, you're not going to come. Like, you're going to die and go to hell, where hell you'll be burnt with hellfire every day. Like, the God that we are discussing, that we are told to live with, has constantly been a violent creature, a fearful creature but yet again, when you sit back in your room, when you're finding what faith or spirituality means to you, when you're seeking, when Hajat was talking about how they had to seek God back for themselves, it didn't come from a place of fear. You went within yourself, and we understand God as peace, that when I am walking with God, or when I find my spirituality, I'm looking for comfort that I've not found in human connection. I'm looking to speak to somebody who is going to something that is going to ease my pain, right? So until we get back to that point where we start to discuss, like Ruby said, these books that we're reading have been interpreted over again and again by people who have their own biases. But what's the true essence, I think, of God is that thing that we feel when you wake up in the morning, Didi, and your heart thinks about somebody who is lesser than you, and you say, okay, I need to go and do this and this. Or when your mind tells you, like, brings up this name in your head, and the spirit is telling you, call Ruby, call Ruby, call Ruby. And you call Ruby, and Ruby says, man, I'm having a difficult day. That is God. That is the movement of God, like the spirituality that reaches out and tells you, touches you in that place of gentleness. Reach out in gentleness. Don't be threatened into, and if you don't do it, you're going to die and go to hell where you'll burn forever. That is, come on.
Of the tithe conversation. Again, I like to make reference to my brother because he's a pastor, he reads his books, but he still, I think he's also fine, he's on a journey of understanding this God where he's reading, he's doing theology classes, understanding where they're at, but also I'm picking off the point of we have to, because I had a question to him and I'm like, okay, if I've been collecting my tithe because I'm not sure, I'm still struggling where I should put my tithe, if I got it and took it to an orphanage, what would happen?
Still tithe.
And he had no answer. The person reading the books, but also preaching to people. So again, it goes. Because of time, we'll just give our parting shots on what we've been discussing and what we should put out there to the religious folks who are confusing the narrative, but also how, as a people, we should conduct ourselves in that realm.
So, as we are putting parting shots, I just want to go back to something that Ruth shared. We're seeing the trickle down effect of misinterpretation of the scriptures with the wars that are happening, where people feel they are the chosen children of the Almighty, you know, and we are seeing the promised children, the Viana, and we are the Ghana. And so we are seeing this, like the trickle effect of scriptures being misinterpreted. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about that we've not discussed here so much is our cultural faith that we call oblogo, witchcraft. We see some of these things being done within the faith institutions when they're doing the exorcism, procedures, when they are healing and they tell someone, go shower salt. These are the same things. What do we call those things? Like those practices that are traditional practices, and they're being demonized. And I think as human beings, sometimes, as I said, we need to go back and check our history. Our parents did these things, our great-grandparents did these things, and nothing happened to them. And they were always well informed. They would know today is not a day for us to leave the compound. Do not leave the compound. And the minute, and it is, I think, something to do with also the inner spirit that Ruth was saying. When your inner spirit says, don't go, and you insist, and then you go, and then you're robbed. Or your inner spirit says, don't eat this, and you eat it, and then you get food poisoning. So there is always that inner spirit that we need to reflect on. And I like how the Buddhists do it, people who believe that, who are in that faith. They've mastered the art of sitting and internalizing with your inner voice. We lack that. I think Christianity has been a walk, next thing, like move fast. It's fast-paced. Rarely do you find people in the church sitting and listening to their inner voices. And because of that, Pastor Chayogera, kyetutambulirako, tewali akibuuza, no one asks, no one differs. Parting shots. Let's separate faith from ethics, from empisa, behavior, from faith. Sometimes people naturally have horrible, terrible manners, including the pastors, the priests, nga balina just empisa mbi, and they kind of hide it under religion. We have people who are, when it comes to SGBV, we've seen faith leaders grooming young children within their faith institutions. When it comes to the Muslims, we're seeing countries where they're bringing laws, like Iran, where they're bringing laws where 9-year-old girls can get married. We've seen documentaries of these girls trying to flee. And imagine if you have a child who is 9 years, a daughter, and she's being forced into a marriage, and she's taken, and she's abused in that home, and goes through these horrific things. As a 9-year-old, her innocence is taken away. But we also still see it within the Christian faith happening, underage girls being groomed and thinking it's okay. Yeah. So let's separate faith from ethics. And learn your history, please.
History to forcinga. But you realize that whatever faith we belong to currently, it was because of what our parents believed in and all that. So, buli wokula wazula. That's what I believe. But parting shots, especially if when I relate GBV with faith, faith should never be used to justify violence. It should be a source of protection, dignity, and healing. We have all had cases of somebody uses their faith to justify why they are doing exactly whatever they are doing. Whatever. Even marrying off young kids because, like it's a lot. People use faith to justify violence. So let's try so much not to, use it as a justification to violence. If it is GBV, if it's abuse, let us call it out. That this pastor, this sheikh, this person does this and this and this, and it is wrong, it is GBV, it is abuse. It has nothing to do with faith or religion. Thank you.
I will not differ much from what you've said. I still personally don't go to the mosque. I believe I can worship wherever I am, and my prayer is listened to. Parting shots. We are all humans first, before religion, before faith, before whatever. So, man or woman, female or male, they, others, we are all human. Let's not use religion to harm. Let's use religion and faith to heal. These places are supposed to be sanctuary. But then you find a place where you would have gone to seek refuge is a place that is going to blame you. It is a place that is going to judge you and everything. So before you even state anything, I'll be like, go. Kyekikwambaza bw'otyo. So twawule eddiini ku mpisa ez'obuntu. Let's be human. That's all I can say.
I think for me, as a queer woman, I refuse to believe that God is a white man sitting on a throne with a long beard. Like he's seated up there with a long white kaftan and a white beard with a stick. I refuse to believe in that God. And I don't see them. Even when I pray, I don't see that one. Right? And when I think of God, I see myself. I'm not saying I'm God, but I know I'm created in God's very own image. So the goodness in me is a reflection of God. In that even when I am struggling with the other yin-yang side, the darkness within me, I know that is how God created me. It's the balance of, I need to see this so that I know, I can be gentle, I can be kind, I should be loving. So I refuse to ever believe that God is a white man seated up on a throne. I refuse to believe that when that trumpet happens of wherever heaven looks like, I know for a fact that I, as a lesbian woman, will walk through that gate of heaven before Kazimba, Mugaru, or Sempa walks in. The gates will open for me before they open for them, because they have spent so much of their time preaching against what my ugliness and how I will not go to heaven. But God says, judge not, and you will not be judged. So me with my, I'll walk through the gate of heaven before those people walk in. And so faith does not look like those men who preach it, does not look like the things they do. It looks like the things that God says to me in my heart.
I think God is a lesbian, a non-binary lesbian, like me. But for my parting shots on, especially on faith and the use of faith to perpetuate abuse and violence, I think it is important for us who are a little distance away from faith, or in fact even as survivors, because me, I'm a survivor of spiritual abuse and financial abuse and emotional abuse, for us to keep pointing it out, to keep prodding at the system. But also, there is a common saying in Uganda which says, involve us, let us be involved. I think I appreciate when people want to step away from faith spaces and churches, but let us be involved, because they claim that these are spaces for us to get in. Let's get in. Me, I'll get involved by sleeping with the wife and the husband as well. But that is my personal involvement. But otherwise, let's all be involved, because once we are in the system, it's how we can dismantle it. But even from outside, challenge the system at every turn. Challenge notions of God which are very narrow and specific, because some people want to gatekeep God. God cannot be gatekept. My faith, the Bible that I'm reading, is not for just a few, it is for all who are weary and heavy laden to come to Jesus. So I feel like let's challenge the system, but also let's challenge the gatekeepers of the system.
Thanks, Bala. Thanks, Nanzi. Thanks, Ruby. Thanks, Asha. Thanks. Asha, for me, my parting shot would be, again, I'm not to echo what Bala said, challenging the system, because the system is not a system without the people implementing. So, calling out these religious folk who are using the quote-unquote books to confuse the humans, but also abuse is abuse. End of the day, we are created in God's image. And if we don't call out people who are abusing the people He created in their own image, we are in trouble. The Main Break podcast has come to an end. Click like, share. Women of Faith in Action.